Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokemon trading card game, and you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now, this week we're going to be looking at a little bit of news, and then we are going to be looking at the Pokekyun collection. This is going to be our Radiant Collection 2 over here in the English and other European-speaking world, i.e. not Japan. And then we're going to be looking at the EXs from Breakpoint, which is the upcoming set, which is releasing very, very shortly indeed. Now, we're not going to be going through the whole of Breakpoint today, if for no other reason than, you know, it's going to take time, to be honest with you. So what we're going to do is we're going to be focusing just on the EXs today, maybe the breaks, depending how I'm feeling. And then we're going to look at, you know, the trainers and all the other cards next week. So, I should give the usual announcements. You can find a complete archive of the pod at ptcgradio.wordpress.com. You can follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and you can email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. And above all else, make sure you go and check out my videos and subscribe on YouTube. I can be found at youtube.com/PTCGRadio, where you will find a whole bunch of interesting videos. Recently, I finished uploading the Truro City Championship Expanded Cities videos. The final round is up on there, you know, for your viewing pleasure. There's going to be no new commentary videos this week, but what we're going to do is we're going to do some different kind of videos. Probably tomorrow, you'll be able to find my top 10 cards from Breakthrough. And yes, I am aware that's a little bit late. The Breakpoint one will hopefully be less late. So there's a bit more hindsight than I'm used to giving in those videos, but I think it'll still be pretty good. And I'm hoping that by the weekend, I'll be starting a new series where I look at the actual top 10 cards from old sets. So the first one, we're going to look at Heart Gold, Soul Silver. And as that is a set which has released, been played for a few years, and since rotated out, and that's actually old enough that it isn't even legal and expanded anymore, we've had, you know, years worth of results and data and all of that. So I feel fairly comfortable in my ability to actually sit down and tell you, when it comes to sets like that, what were the top 10 cards in those sets. So that's something we're going to be doing starting this week. So get yourself over to youtube.com/PTCGRadio and check that bad boy out. So starting up this week, we're fairly light on news. We're going to look through the Pokekyun collection in a minute, which will be fun, I suppose. America's X and Y set has been revealed. Now, it's going to be called Fates Collide, which I personally have a bit of a problem with, because ever since the Break Pokemon came out, we've had Breakthrough, Breakpoint, Fates Collide. No, that's just rubbish. It's like they couldn't think of a good break something in, 2 minutes, and they were like, right, we'll just do something else. I disapprove, Pokemon. I disagree with how you're naming the sets, and honestly, I'm personally a little bit upset with you right now. I'm a little bit sad. It is still going to feature break Pokemon. We've just no longer got the break moniker at the beginning, which makes me a little bit sad. Now, it is going to feature Zygarde in its many different forms, which will be the first time in the trading card game. We also, this is going to be the Awakening of the Psychic King set, which is coming out in Japan soon. I think it's coming out in March, middle of March in Japan. Actually, it's coming out in Japan on March the 18th, which regular listeners will know is the date I'm very excited for, because that's when Pokkén Tournament comes out, and I could not be much more excited for that. So, it's not huge news. We knew that was what it was going to be, that we were getting Awakening of Psychic Kings. And for us, this will be our May set. So Breakpoint will be our February set. Fates Collide, I still hate that name. Well, hate's a strong word. I still disapprove of dropping break from the name, put it that way. That is going to be our May set, and will probably be legal for the majority of national championships. Probably not all of them, but it's going to be the majority of them. There's going to be 120 cards in the set. It's going to have 10 regular Pokemon EX and 3 Mega Evolutions. Now, we know that 2 of the Megas are going to be Alakazam and Altaria, but we don't know what the other one is. We also know we're going to be getting Umbreon EX and Lugia Break. So yeah, The Elite Trainer box is going to feature Mega Alakazam, and that shouldn't be a particular surprise. Breakthrough had Mega Mewtwo, as you would expect, and that's what tends to happen. These Elite Trainer boxes, they're the ones that have the dice and the damage counters. They always feature the kind of the booster pack Pokemon, so you shouldn't be surprised to hear about that. Now, this set is going to start dropping in the next few weeks, so hopefully, like we had with the last couple of sets, I'm hoping we're going to have a nice steady stream of leaked information. So rather than, waiting and getting all the scans in one go, what Pokemon have tended to do lately over in Japan is do, half a dozen cards a week for a few weeks, or maybe even more than that sometimes, and giving us the set. And I like that, because it means every week we come on and there's new stuff to talk about, so we can but hope. Oh, and there's going to be a free pack pin blister, bit of a tongue twister there, where you're going to get free packs and a pin, and you're going to be able to get Mega Alakazam or Zygarde. So yeah, whoop whoop. Yeah, funsies. Again, not huge news, but still kind of cool. And the only other real news this week is that Nationals is moving back to Columbus, Ohio in the US. Somewhere it's been before. I believe it's been in Indiana the last couple of years, but it's moving back to Columbus, Ohio. It's not particularly amazing, but, get psyched, ladies and gentlemen. It's important because, it's one of those things. To be honest, it doesn't really matter where Nationals is in terms of the venue, because it's going to be a big hall where you go and play Pokemon for a couple of days. What is going to be interesting, of course, is how long it takes you to get there, what the amenities are going to be like around, etc. Now, it's going to be on July the 1st through July the 3rd, which will give plenty of time for Fates Collide to be released and become legal. So, although some of the, and this happens every year, some of the early national championships will be before the May set is tournament legal. Not the case in the US, July the 1st through July the 3rd. Now, it was last in Columbus in 2008, so, there we go. There isn't really much to say about that. Oh, actually, here's some new information, which I forgot to say. It's going to have a Pokkén Tournament competition. Now, I am merely guessing here, but I think it is moderately likely that Pokkén Tournament is going to become integrated into the competitive landscape. This is actually quite big news. I should have led with this. At the moment, we've got VGC and TCG, and that's where the competition lies, a video game and a trading card game. But when you think about Pokemon's other products, even the games, you've got things like Pokemon Shuffle and all of that. There aren't really any games where you can imagine Pokemon doing a competitive scene. But when you think about Pokkén Tournament, I'm told it's pronounced Pokkén. I suppose it makes sense. But if you pronounce it Pokkén, I won't hate you. But Pokkén does sound weird. Pokkén does sound better. I don't know if someone told me that or I just made it up. Either way, Pokkén sounds better, and that's what I'm rolling with. So Pokkén Tournament, it makes sense that this would be, a thing. Now, is it going to be they have one tournament a year at Nationals, as they're clearly doing this year? Or is it going to be something with championship points where they have it in Worlds like VGC and TCG? The honest answer is I have absolutely no idea, though I hope to find out more information soon. I can tell you, although you've probably guessed it by now, I will be practicing Pokkén Tournament a lot, and I'm hoping I get the opportunity to have a go at some tournaments, although it's going to be awkward if they're the same weekend as Trading Card, because I'm quite into the Trading Card. Now, in terms of how I'm going to cover Pokkén if it does become a big thing, I can imagine bringing it into the old YouTube. Don't worry, I'll make it nice and clear what's Pokkén and what's TCG. You guys will not be hard done by. TCG will always be my first love in terms of Pokemon. And, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how they go with this. As for the podcast, that's TCG, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the way it's staying. Although I might chuck in a little bit of Pokkén stuff here or there. So yeah, get practicing, ladies and gentlemen. Pokkén Tournament is going, and if there's a tournament at Nationals, it remains to be seen. What I would say is, if you look at what Pokemon's been doing the last couple of years, they've been shoring it up. They've been making it more structured. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Pokkén Tournament actually becoming more of a thing. having it at a lot of tournaments. Now, maybe they have it at regionals, but not cities, or I don't know is the honest answer, but I'm pretty gosh darned excited to find out. So yeah, Pokkén Tournament. How cool is that going to be? I still want a playable Mamoswine. Now let's have a look at the Pokekyun collection. Now, it's not as I suspected. It is not a fantastically amazing set. There are arguably no really good competitive cards. We have a couple of new cards that are at least moderately interesting, and we have a few reprints, and actually really good reprints, which firstly look gorgeous. But secondly, they're going to have the effect of keeping cards in the format for maybe even another couple of years, quite frankly, which is really, really interesting. Now, the art on this set is beautiful. It's unusual, and they tend to do this with the little sets a little bit. The Chikorita card, for instance, has Pikachu chasing Chikorita down the stairs. And then you've got the Charmander card is a Charmander, nicking a boy's glasses. Although the boy's chasing after him in full-on tears. And then the Charmeleon card is a Charmeleon sitting while the same boy reads a few years older. And then the Charizard card is that same dude as a grown-up being shouted from snow by Charizard. So you see a little story being told between those three cards. Now, just like the Radiant collection that came out as part of Legendary Treasures, the art on this set is utterly beautiful. There's a full art and a regular art Flareon EX, and the full art has Flareon in the middle, flanked by Vaporeon and Jolteon, and it's just a stunning looking card. Although the non-full art has Flareon kind of peeking over the border of the picture in a moderately cute manner. There's a Pikachu, which is just a pile of Pikachus kind of piling on and having fun. There is a Raichu who is rolling around in flowers with a very strange expression on his face. There is a Wobbuffet that honestly looks like he's about to go to the bathroom all over the floor, if that's not a little bit too crude. There's a weird person that looks a lot like a Gulpin, balancing his nose on a fork, next to a Gulpin balancing his nose on a fork. So I'm hoping this is starting to show you what the art style of this is like, ladies and gentlemen. It is, quite frankly, pretty gosh darn cool. So if you're a collector, you want these cards. You're going to want a binder with this set, start to finish. There's only 32 cards in the Pokekyun collection, and I'm probably pronouncing horrifically, and if I am, I do sincerely apologise. And, it looks amazing. So let's have a look in terms of what we can see for competitive value. Now, there's a Chikorita, and that's the other thing I should mention before we start. This is one of those rare sets where they have weird basics. So, for instance, there's a Chikorita, but no evolutions. No Bayleaf, no Meganium, which is a little bit weird. There's a Chikorita, it's terrible. There's a Shroomish, it's terrible. There's a Charmander, fire and a colourless, 20 damage, flip a coin. If heads, 20 times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. Now, that could potentially be relevant. I'll tell you why in a moment. There's a Charmeleon. Colourless energy, search your deck for a supporter card and put it in your hand. Not particularly good. Fire and a double colourless, 80 damage, could be good. I'll tell you why in a second. Now, the one new card that I really like the look of in this set is Charizard. Firstly, 160 HP on a stage 2 is pretty good. But here's the thing. It's got one attack, which is garbage. 2 fire, 2 colourless, 130 damage. Now, don't get me wrong. Double colourless plus blacksmith means you can use that in one turn. It's not a terrible attack by any stretch of the imagination. Although you put a muscle band on, it's doing 150, when really you want to be doing 170. No, ladies and gentlemen. The attack that I am somewhat enamoured by is the first attack, remember, for 1 colourless energy. Choose an attack from this Pokemon's previous evolutions. This Pokemon performs that attack. Now, let's go back to Charmander. For 2 energy, but remember, the wording of Charizard, and this is a Japanese translation, it could change. It might change to be if it's got the appropriate energy, but at the moment you're doing it for a colourless energy. Choose an attack from this Pokemon's previous evolutions. This Pokemon performs that attack. So now, for a single colourless energy on a 160 HP Pokemon, 20 damage, flip a coin. If heads, it's not 20 plus, it's 20 times. If heads, this attack does 20 damage times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon. Now, if tails, it does nothing, and that is potentially a problem here. I'm not saying that this is absolutely without reproach, but let's say that you've got, 9 damage on a Charizard, and one hit KOing 160 HP Pokemon is far from a given. Let's say your opponent does 90 damage. For 1 energy, you're doing 180 damage if you can flip heads. But hang on a second, you might be thinking, there's only a 50% chance of hitting heads. What can we do about this? Might I remind you of the surprisingly little played Trick Coin, which came out in Phantom Forces and is still legal in Standard. In Expanded, you've also got the Victory Flip Victini, which has the ability on the bench, which allows you to, it's Trick Coin, but it's in an ability on the bench. Once during your turn, after you flip any coins for an attack of the Pokemon this card is attached to, you may ignore all effects of those coin flips and begin flipping those coins again. Now, you can only use one effect per turn, i.e., you can't use the Victini and Trick Coin. It's one or the other. But at that stage, you've now got a 75% chance of hitting a head, because you only need to hit 1 heads from 2 coins. Now, it's still a bit risky, and it's still flippy, it's still going to have damage on. But let's think about this. Let's say you've got no damage on you, or you're worried about flipping heads. You can still, if you've gone the traditional route, do 80 for 1 energy by copying Charmander's ability. Or, if you've just got Charizard out, then you can do 130 damage for a double colourless and 2 fire, i.e. double colourless and a blacksmith. As it's a fire Pokemon, you can combine this in a deck with the Entei that can have 2 tools attached. And you can still use things like Fiery Torch or Scorched Earth, both of which one's a trainer, one's a stadium, that allow you to discard 1 fire energy from your hand and draw 2 cards. Now, you have to play this like a traditional Stage 2 where you put the basic down, you rare candy the following turn, but that attack is just juicy for a single colourless energy. It really, really is. Yes, I know that the ideal situation in which to use it is when you're copying Charmander's ability, but when you've got 160 HP Pokemon doing 20 times the amount of damage counters on it, that is often going to be good. And if you go the traditional route, i.e. don't use rare candy, I say traditional route, it's more often people do use rare candy, unless you're playing Crobat. But, it's incredibly useful. It has potential. Do I think Charizard is going to be a top-tier deck? No, I really don't. But do I think it's going to make an appearance at League, or as a 1-1-1 tech, or and let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, that it's 1 colourless energy. So in any deck where you're already playing rare candy, and I know those decks are, pardon the pun, rare nowadays, you can just put 1 Charmander and 1 Charizard in there, and you can go ahead and search, and you can go ahead and just use one of the rare candies you're using anyway with that 1 Charizard, and then you can use whatever energy you're using to do the Remember attack. It's a brilliant Hail Mary plan. I expect to see some more creative types using this occasionally in their decks. But I'm afraid if I remember... Oh, no, there's one other card I like the look of, sorry. There's Flareon EX. We looked at him last week. He's got an ability which allows you to once per turn move a fire energy to him from one of your benched... from another Pokemon. Many times per turn, like it as a late game sweeper, move all the energy on and smash. Not the case. And then it's the Keldeo/Raikou attack. 50 damage plus 20 for each fire energy for a minimum of 3 colourless energy. It's fine, but it's not amazing. Yes, you can use it with Emboar in Expanded, but it's only Blastoise that's ever been useful, and at the moment, that's because you can use Archie's Ace in the hole. I don't expect to see Flareon Emboar seeing any play whatsoever. There's also a full art Flareon EX. There is a Snorunt that evolves into a Frostlass, and this I really like. It's got the attack. Now, those of you that remember the old Gengar, I want to say Stormfront, I could be wrong about that. Anyone that remembers that old Gengar will remember Fainting Spell, the most annoying thing Pokemon have ever done in the history of the Pokemon trading card game. There are very few things in this game that I've ever just flat out hated, with absolutely no redeeming features whatsoever. It was the Stormfront Gengar. I've double-checked I was correct. Go me! Fainting Spell was one of them. And it's, if you would be knocked out, then by damage, not by poison or something like that. If you would be knocked out, then don't worry about it. Flip a coin, and then if heads, you knock out your opponent's Pokemon as well. Now, one of the reasons I really despise this is because at the time I would play Donphan Prime, and you would have a card called Expert Belt. And what Expert Belt did, it was a tool, and it gave you 20 more HP, and it made all of your attacks do 20 more damage. So think of it like a giant cloak and a muscle band in one card. The downside to Expert Belt was that it essentially turned your Pokemon into an EX. And were that Pokemon to be KO'd, you would give up 2 prizes. So there'd be times that I'd build up this Stage 1 Donphan with the Expert Belt, get a KO on the Gengar, feel very proud of myself, and then only to find out my opponent gets 2 prizes because they flipped heads. Well, the Chandelure recently came out with this same ability, and it saw no play because it was a stage 2 and it didn't have a good attack. Now, Frostlass is a stage 1, and what that means is that you can potentially use Wally to get him out on the first turn of the game and go ahead and, be attacking on turn 1. And Frostlass is so almost good. For free colourless energy, place 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. If that was for a double colourless energy, I think this attack would be genuinely viable. You stick a double colourless on Frostlass and off you go. You've got a 50-50 chance of when you get KO'd, especially in Standard where there's no laser. You've got a 50-50 chance that when you get KO'd, your opponent gets KO'd as well. And while you're doing that, you can spread some damage around and build up another attacker. I wish so hard it was for a double colourless energy. Plus, the Snorunt from which it evolves, there's the picture is a couple of Snorunt gleefully walking along with a Pikachu snowman while Pikachu himself peeks out from an igloo. That is a card with which I want to play in a tournament. Again, if this was a psychic Pokemon, then you'd have Dimension Valley to bring it down. If it was a fire Pokemon, you'd have Blacksmith, but it's a water Pokemon. Now, I know that there's, I think it's called Max Elixir, the card coming in Breakpoint where you look at the top 6 cards and attach any energy there, blah, blah, blah. It's 4 damage counters for free energy is too few. But with the ability, it would be viable. And this makes me sad because I want to play this card so much with Wally. I want to just play a trainer-based, loads of Shaman and trainers to draw, Acrobike and all that. Trainer's mail. And I want to play it with Frostlass, who can be gotten with level ball because he's got 90 HP. And I just want to play, and just put damage counters around and just go. And I can't do it. In fact, spoiler alert, I would totally play this with Vileplume. I just don't think it's viable. Now, what I might do is put, a 1-1 or a 2-2 line into a deck like Vespiquen Vileplume, just to mess with my opponent. But it would make such a difference if this was a double colourless energy. And this makes... I love the Pokemon trading card game. And, I'm still on a bit of a high from finding out Pokkén Tournament is like 6 weeks away. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, like 7 weeks away. But that's not the point. The point is, Pokkén Tournament's coming out soon. And we're going to get competitive play. But Fates Collide is our next set, and then free energy on a Frostlass, ladies and gentlemen. I don't like it, it makes me sad. However, almost like an apology, 2 of my favourite cards that were going to be rotated at the end of this year, they're back. Pikachu and Raichu, and these are the Pikachu and Raichu from X and Y, they're being reprinted. Pikachu, it's a pile of Pikachus, and at the moment it's the best one in competitive play. Because for one colourless energy, flip a coin if head your opponent's Pokemon is paralysed. Now, you never want to use that attack, but it ain't bad just as a kind of Hail Mary play. You might be able to buy yourself a turn using paralysis. And that's pretty gosh darn cool. Certainly if you're playing a Raichu deck and you're going second, you can't evolve unless you play a Wally, which might make you a Wally. I'm going to stop. These puns are not good this week. It's like I'm not even trying. Sorry, I will try harder, ladies and gentlemen. And, if you can't get a Raichu turn 1, maybe Pikachu's stuck in the active. Rather than attaching an energy and manually retreating, maybe you attach an energy and try and paralyze your opponent. And now you can do it with a pile of Pikachus. The other thing that we've got here is a reprint of Raichu. Now, the art on this is nowhere near as good. It's kind of Raichu rolling around in some flowers, but it's still kind of funky. And more importantly, it's Circle Circuit Raichu, 20 damage times the number of your benched Pokemon. Now, both of these cards are from X and Y. Now, we are currently in the format X and Y through to, now Breakthrough, soon Breakpoint. What that means is that when we have Worlds and there is a rotation, as there tends to be, X and Y is going to get rotated and Raichu's gone. Now, assuming that the new generation set follows the regular rules of rotation, that means that by virtue of this being reprinted in the generation set as Radiant Collection 2, oh, by the way, if I forgot to say, these are being printed as the Radiant Collection 2 within the generation set, which is coming out in February. I've seen plenty of people asking how this is being released this week. Those people need to listen to PTCGRadio. If anybody asks, how are these being released? Or says, they're probably going to be a mini-set like Double Crisis. Now, I know I suggested that, but that was a guess. And we know now, ladies and gentlemen. So let them know it's coming out as part of the generation set. It's beautiful. I love these cards, especially the pile of Pikachus. So I'm going to go make me some Raichu-based decks. Now, we also have a reprint of Evil Tao from X and Y, and I think I've made my thoughts on that card rather clear. I am currently playing it in everything. It's a direct reprint. It's already been reprinted as a promo. Now it's reprinted in this. And again, if we've got the same rules of rotation, it's staying in the format. Maybe even, because it's going to go from, by the time we have rotation, we're going to be on Fates Collide. Which means that we're going from, X and Y, Raichu being an X and Y, the older set in rotation, to Breakpoint, the second newest set. We also see reprints of the Wobbuffet from Phantom Forces, which blocks abilities, which is a nice one to have reprinted. And there's a reprint of Gardevoir EX and Mega Gardevoir EX in beautiful full art form, which is, I suppose, kind of cool. And I might be missing something, but I think they are the reprints. Now, the rest of the cards are kind of a little bit rubbish, but let's run through them a little quickly. There's a Dedenne that can do 10 damage plus 20 on a coin flip for a lightning. It will knock out a Joltik. Heck, with a muscle band, you don't even have to hit heads. There is a Gulpin. 30 for a double colourless. It flip a coin, if tails, it does nothing. A Jirachi that for one psychic energy allows you to search your card for any deck and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. Might be good for consistency, but nobody's going to play it. There's an Esper that puts your opponent's Pokemon asleep for a psychic energy. A Meowstic that allows you to move as many damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon as you like. Essentially, you get to move them around, as you wish. So, I suppose that could be fun. Maybe. You never know. And actually, I apologise, that one's I thought it was. It's a reprint from the Flash Fire Meowstic, and it hasn't seen any play since then. By the way, if some of these cards are reprints of old cards that haven't seen any play, I don't think I can be held too responsible for forgetting about them. There's a Flabébé, which is garbage, that evolves into a Floret, which is garbage. A Stage 1 that can do 10 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon for a Fairy Energy. How about a Stage 1 that can do 10 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon for a Colourless Energy and has an awesome ability allowing you to drop 2 damage counters when you evolve into it, and evolves into a not too bad Stage 2. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Floette is a terrible, terrible, terrible Golbat. There is no Florges. Yep, no Florges. There's a Swirlix, which is garbage, which evolves into a Slurpuff, which is garbage. Yeah. There's a Diancie, which is garbage, and we've talked about before. There's a Swablu that's garbage. An Altaria can do 20 damage for one colourless energy. Whoop, whoop. Actually, the Altaria's not appalling, although for a stage 1 it is pretty appalling. The art's amazing. It's got a Dedenne which is literally floating in midair, a Sylveon that looks way too happy, and an Altaria that looks like he might be somewhat delighted. And for one colourless energy, you can flap for 20 damage, and for a double colourless energy, you can do 30 damage or 60 if you've got a fairy Pokemon on your bench. But if you're attacking with a stage 1 Pokemon for a double colourless energy, might I suggest Vespiquen, Raichu, maybe even Noctowl, but not Altaria. There's a Fletchling that's just terrible. That's the one I told you about last week. That's got the attack called Tweet. Can we stop with the Twitter jokes? It's too obvious. There's a reprint of Wally. And there is the Shaymin EX and the Sylveon EX that we went through last week. I like the Shaymin's ability that allows you to heal 20 damage from each basic Pokemon on your bench once per turn. And I'm not too offended by Sylveon EX, who comes in regular and full art form. The full art, she can be seen cuddling up with an Eevee. Sorry, being chased by an Eevee. A very mischievous looking Eevee. 30 damage, plus 30 if you've got a Pokemon tool attached to it. With a Muscle Band, 80 for a DCE isn't too bad. What it does is it gives you a splashable fairy Pokemon. So the problem is you're kind of trapped at doing 160. But let's say that, I don't know, Tyrantrum becomes a big problem, and, you know, everyone's worried about Tyrantrum because everybody's playing Tyrantrum and it's all a big problem. Or indeed, any Pokemon that is weak to Fairy, and I'm just double checking to make sure that Tyrantrum is weak to Fairy. He is. Most of the dragons are weak to Fairy. So maybe if you're really worried about Tyrantrum and you're playing a Bats deck, for instance, then you can tech a Sylveon EX into any deck, and with a Muscle Band, you can do 160 damage. Now, that ain't enough to KO a Tyrantrum EX, so you would have to use something like a Golbat or a Crobat, or even you could attack with something weak one turn and finish off with Sylveon the next. But you'd have to do a little bit of damage. So, if you're looking for a fairy Pokemon to tech into your deck, just to kind of hit for fairy weakness against a Pokemon that you don't like, Sylveon EX will do the job. But I find Pokekyun a frustrating set. Now, let me be clear. This has just about the most beautiful artwork of any set they've ever released. And I might be tempted to enter into fisticuffs with anyone who suggested I was incorrect. And anyone who thinks I'm incorrect and is considering challenging me to said fisticuffs, you can play with a pile of Pikachus. A pile of Pikachus. There are 2 Snorunts running along with an ice sculpture Pikachu, while Pikachu peeks at them from behind an igloo. This set is gorgeous. But oh my goodness, is it close. Now, let's be clear. The reprint of Raichu and the reprint of Yveltal, they've reprinted 2 of my favourite cards in the format. That's awesome. And did I mention pile of Pikachus? But I think this is a set which is close but no cigar. I love the Charizard, but it's on a coin flip. Well, arguably on a coin flip, depending on what you're trying to do. I love Frostlass, or I would if it was 1 energy cost less, or there was decent energy acceleration. I love Sylveon, but if you could hit 70 plus 20 for Muscle Band, now we're talking, because now you're hitting 180 on Fairy Weak Pokemon, and that's the key. The only real Fairy Weak Pokemon that see any play at the moment are Giratina and Tyrantrum. Well, Giratina's blocking DCE anyway, so, you know. Although, just to be clear, it's still a decent Giratina counter, but you're not going to get the one-hit KO. Not unless you can do 20 damage some other way. So, it's a set of close but no cigar. And the one other card, which I should mention, is the one item card in the set. We got one supporter, but that's a reprint of Wally. I haven't pronounced it that way for a little while. And we've got an item, a tool called Crown of Thorns. I kind of like this card. Crown of Flowers. It's very much not a Crown of Thorns. At the end of your opponent's turn, you may heal 20 damage from the basic Pokemon this card is attached to. Now, while we're there, it should be to which this card is attached. You may heal 20 damage from the basic Pokemon to which this card is attached. But we'll forgive them, I suppose we can let them fly. Most people say it that way. But it's kind of cool. Rather than something like an Eviolite or a Hard Charm, which stops 20 damage, or a Giant Cape, which gives you 20 more HP, this heals 20. Now, it's at the end of your opponent's next turn, so it's kind of got pros and cons. It's better than something like a Hard Charm, because if you're poisoned, you'll heal 20 damage from the poison. That's good. But it's worse than something like Hard Charm, because if the opponent would do 180 to an EX, then it is only for basic, remember, hence why I'm thinking EX is. If it would do 180, then what we see is something like a Hard Charm would bring it down to 160 and you'd live. Crown of Flowers, you die and not be able to recover that 20 damage. So pros and cons with Crown of Flowers. It's not a great card, but it's not terrible. And that's the Pokekyun collection, ladies and gentlemen. I quite like the Shaman, but I don't think it's quite good enough. I really like the Sylveon as a splashable tech. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, it is a splashable tech. Anytime you're worried about a Pokemon that's weak to Fairy, Sylveon EX from now on will be one of your go-to cards. Because 80 damage for one energy is not to be sniffed at when you're hitting for weakness. Just you'll need something like, if you're playing it in a Bats deck, that would be good. So say, for instance, you're playing something like Manectric Bats. Maybe you put one Sylveon in there to help you against, something like a Giratina. Although, to be honest, you'd have a good matchup against Giratina anyway. But maybe you wouldn't have a great matchup against Tyrantrum. So maybe that you can use that. I don't know. It's there. Maybe there'll be a Pokemon in future where you will really need this. And then I quite like Frostlass, but it's too expensive. I quite like Charizard, but it's too flippy. And I love that they reprinted Yveltal and Raichu and Wobbuffet. That makes me happy. Reprint of Meowstic, I'll take it or leave it. And one final thought, which I think is important to finish on when we're talking about the Pokekyun collection. It's a pile of Pikachus. Now, we're going to have a quick talk about Breakpoint before we leave. And given that we're 38 minutes in, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the EXs. And then probably next week, we'll have a look at the trainers and break Pokemon. And then we'll finish off in a couple of weeks' time looking at, I call them the hidden gems. Really, they're the non-EX, non-break Pokemon that you should be looking at. So let's start off with Emboar EX. We're going to go in set order here. Emboar EX, I love Emboar. Certainly the best of the black and white starters. He evolves from Tepig, we good. I'm not a huge fan. Spiral Punch, 20 damage for 2 energy. 20 more for each heads, flip a coin until you get tails. Okay, not bad. Not amazing, but not bad, There might be turns where, in an emergency, as far as you can ever get an emergency, you end up, just flipping a coin and maybe you get lucky. Now, what I do like is the second attack. And this is where Emboar might see a little bit of, no, sorry, I'm lying to you, it's not going to see any play. Strong Flare. It might see some play. I'm lying to you. I am lying to you. I'm looking at both Charizards at once. Now, Emboar's second attack for 2 fire, double colourless, does 150. Does that sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? Well, it should. because that is the same attack that the Charizard EX has that everybody's playing in Entei. And the reason you play that Charizard in Entei is it does 150. You whack a Muscle Band on that bad boy, you're doing 170 for 4 energy or a double colourless Blacksmith. It's a way to... It's easier to hit 170 with Charizard than it is to hit it with Entei. Entei, you need 2 Muscle Bands rather than 1, and it's on a non-EX that are likely to die more quickly, although they only give up 1 prize. So swings and roundabouts. And people play generally 1 or 2 Charizard, usually 2, in these Entei decks, so they've got a big attacker that can easily hit 170. Well, Emboar's got the same attack, except it's not quite the same, and here's the difference. Charizard EX... he can only hit for 150 one turn. The next turn, he can't use Combustion Blast. Whereas Emboar hits 150, and then you discard 2 energy. And your 2 choices are, you discard the DCE and then find a DCE next turn, or you discard the 2 fire and then you Blacksmith again the following turn. Although you need to be careful leaving a DCE there, because that's when something like Xerosic or Enhanced Hammer comes and ruins your day. So... I don't think Emboar's amazing, but clearly in any fire deck that people are going to run, like Entei at the moment, it is worth having a Pokemon that, with a Muscle Band, can do 170 for a double colourless and a Blacksmith. And that's what Emboar EX does. Plus, this might be controversial, and I'm not willing to go to fisticuffs over this one, but Emboar... he's a better Pokemon than Charizard. Now, I am aware I'm in the minority for that, and that's absolutely fine. I prefer Emboar. Also, I suppose if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, Charizard has a retreat cost of 2, and Emboar has a retreat cost of 3, which means, a DCE or a Blacksmith to retreat Charizard. Emboar takes 1 more energy. Charizard does 60 for 3 energy, so Emboar can attack for 1 Blacksmith, Charizard can't. But Charizard's got more guaranteed damage, but it's really the second attack that does 150. I like Emboar. I can see Emboar seeing a little bit of play. Certainly, if I were going to be playing Entei, after Breakpoint is released, and I don't think I'm going to be honest, it's not my kind of deck. But if I was going to be playing Entei, I would switch out the Charizards for Emboars. Call me crazy, but I'm going there. Gyarados EX. 1 colourless energy, flip a coin until you get tails. For each head, search your deck for a water energy and attach it to this Pokemon. Now, there are potential problems with this one, including but not limited to, it's weak to lightning and Manectric is seeing a fair bit of play at the moment, but that's not stopping Yveltal. The other problem is Yveltal. What you don't want to do is, he attacks for 4 energy, but if you use that first attack, let's say you hit 3 heads, and actually there is a possibility that you actually, and it's only going to happen, maybe once the whole time you play it, but there is a possibility you hit like 7 heads in a row, and you're forced to put all of your energy from your entire deck onto 1 Gyarados, and then when it gets KO'd, you're a little bit screwed. But the other thing is, if you sit there and pile energy from the attack, you're not doing any damage, and that gives Yveltal essentially a free hit. Now, Splash Burn does 130 damage, plus 10 to each of your bench Pokemon for 4 energy. It's overpriced, it's not terribly good, it ain't going to see a lot of play. But it's got a Mega Gyarados, and remember it's a set, so we're getting the Spirit Link. Now, this one is a little bit more... It's very much a YOLO card. Now, here we're rocking up to 240 HP, which is awesome. Blast Geyser. 4 colourless energy, 120 damage. You may do 20 more for each water energy attached to this Pokemon. If you do, discard the top 2 cards of your deck. Now, I kind of like this. Now, it's only really viable with Archie's Blastoise. But it's viable with Archie's Blastoise. Now, that makes it a better expanded deck than a standard deck, purely because in expanded, you've got Jirachi, Computer Search, and Execute, all of which make a turn 1 Blastoise a far more realistic possibility. But you've still got it there. Now, let's say you put 4 energy onto a Gyarados. That would be doing 80 plus the 120, which means for 4 energy, you are doing 200 damage. Now, let's assume that you're using Keldeo EX. Now, you would be doing 20 for each energy, which is 60, plus 50 standard, 80, plus 50 standard, which is 130. I.e., Gyarados will be one-hit KOing EXs much quicker than Keldeo will. Not only that, but Gyarados has a 240 HP rather than 170. So that basically means, even though you need a minimum of 4 energy rather than 3, that makes Mega Gyarados better. It even is maybe worth using a DCE or 2 in your deck, because let's say, 2 water energy and a DCE, you'd still be hitting 160, which is enough to KO any non-EX and some of the weaker EXs. And then you're doing free energy just like Keldeo. And you can still put down 1 DCE as your attachment for the turn, while using Blastoise's ability to put down as many water energy as you like. Now, I say better than Keldeo. That is bearing in mind it's a Mega. You need to use the Spirit Link in order to not... it's actually a shiny Mega Gyarados, I should say. You need to use a Spirit Link so you don't lose your turn, and you can only evolve after a turn has gone by. So it's going to hit your consistency a little bit. But I would not be surprised to see a couple of these teched into a Blastoise deck, because this smashes pretty easily. Let's think about it in terms of matchups. Blastoise against Yveltal is pretty much a 50-50 matchup in Expanded. Keldeo can one-hit KO Yveltal once you get 6 energy down. Once you do get 6 energy down, a 2 energy Yveltal EX will get the return KO. Keldeo will generally get the first KO, because they're not going to pile energy on until they can get the first KO. But Yveltal can use something like Hex Maniac. So the theory with when you're playing as Yveltal, they hit with a big energy Keldeo. You then want to return KO while playing a Hex Maniac, so they can't put down 6 energy next turn and get their second KO. And then on your next turn, you would Lysander something like a Shaman to get an easy 2 prizes, at which point they kill your Yveltal, you revenge, you win the game. Nice and simple. Now let's try that same situation with a Mega Gyarados. You put 4 energy on there, you do 200 and KO. Well, now you are adding 80 damage with Mega Gyarados. They're doing 20 damage, which means they need 7 energy on an Yveltal to KO a Mega Blastoise. Yveltal does 20 damage plus 20 for each energy attached to both active, which essentially means you need 11 total energy. If Gyarados has 4 energy on, they will one-hit KO Yveltal, and Yveltal will need 7 energy or 6 and a muscle band in order to return the KO onto Mega Gyarados. And this is why I think this is going to see some play in Expanded Blastoise. Against a lot of decks, you don't need it. Against Night March, you'll be using Kyurem and Articuno. And against Vespiquen Flareon, you'll be using Kyurem and Articuno. And against Seismitoad Giratina, Keldeo will probably pull its weight. But one of the biggest, most successful decks in Expanded is Yveltal. And I have generally found if both players draw the same, Yveltal has a hand in that matchup, purely because if the game slows down, you can build up a couple of big Yveltals and win. But the way the game usually goes is that Keldeo will take the first KO, but sooner or later the Yveltal player will have a turn or 2 of Hex Maniac, and that will just slow Blastoise down too much. But it will be very, very difficult for an Yveltal deck to take down a Mega Gyarados. 7 energy, and if you don't KO it in one turn, they're getting a prize next turn. I don't think people are going to go full-on Blastoise Mega Gyarados, but I could see it seeing some play. I could see it being teched in. So, 2 EXs down, 2 fairly niche rules, but two that could see a little bit of play. Let's see if we can keep this going with the next I'm lying to you. The next 2 EXs, both of which are water. Now, we can start off with Pokémon EX. Now, there was an incorrect translation of this one doing the rounds. If you watched the Team Fish Knuckle videos that I was in last week, and if you haven't, I tweeted out a link. Go and check my Twitter, @TheWassy. I was talking with Andrew Wambolt and Josh Marking, I believe his name was, or as you might know them, Team Fish Knuckle, the Charizard Lounge and Team Fish Knuckles respectively. And we were talking about all kinds of things. And one of the things we talked about was what's likely to be good when Breakpoint comes out, which I gave a very diplomatic answer, basically saying we have no idea, because we don't. Hands up if you thought Entei was genuinely going to be one of the top decks. Put your hand down. I accuse you of being a liar. You may have liked Entei, and you may have thought it was good, but who really thought it was going to be one of the top decks? Nobody did. And I know, because I read like every website dedicated to Pokemon, and nobody was talking about it. But Andrew had a very good answer. He said Palkia, and here's why he's wrong, but it's not his fault. There is a mistranslation. Now, Aqua Turbo, 2 water energy, 40 damage, search your deck for 2 water and attach them to one of your bench Pokemon. At least you're attaching it to the bench so you're not fueling Evil Tail's attack right as you let him take a swing at you, but it ain't amazing. What could have been amazing is Pearl Hurricane, which originally was said to do 120 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon for 4 energy. So what you would do is you would play Blastoise and you would put Palkia in that deck, and you would just use Palkia to snipe Shaman until you won the game. Well, that's not what Palkia does. 120 damage plus 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Now, to be fair, I could see this working in Blastoise as a Night March counter if your opponent isn't playing Mr. Mime. If he's playing Mr. Mime and stopping bench damage, it doesn't work. But if they're not using Mr. Mime to block bench damage, that 30 damage will KO a Joltik or will KO a Feebas. If you're lucky, you might be able to KO a Mew in the active, if people are still playing Mew in Night March and Expanded, while KOing a Joltik on the bench and taking free prizes with Palkia. But you know what's much better than Palkia against Night March? Articuno. Because you take an extra prize. And with a Muscle Band, you guarantee a KO on a Joltik with 1 out of 3 heads, which is a 7 in 8 chance, 12.5%. No, sorry, 87.5%. You're one-hit KOing for 2 prizes, Pumpkaboo or Joltik. So, as much as I quite like Palkia in that respect, I don't see him seeing any play. Similarly, Manaphy, he's like Darkrai if Darkrai's attack was utter garbage and Darkrai had 0 HP. It's got 120 HP, which is not good. Puts it into Shaman Jirachi style territory. Now, it does give all your water Pokemon free retreat. Now, one of my most... Oh, and for 2 water energy, you can do 60 damage and heal 30 from one of your bench. You do not want to be attacking and leaving a 120 HP EX in the active. If that's happening, ladies and gentlemen, things be going wrong. It ain't working very well at all. So, why is this not good when Darkrai saw a lot of play? Now, one of my most embarrassing moments on this podcast, and look it up, like I say, there is a complete archive that can be found on PTCGRadio.wordpress.com. And when I originally looked at Dark Explorers, and I'm not proud of this, but I looked at Darkrai EX, and I said, decent ability, never going to see any play. Now, history, shall we say, has proven me wrong. Sorry about that. The attack doing 90 to the active and 30 to the bench and being able to use Dark Patch to fuel the attack plus the Dark Cloak ability made it good. Just the free retreat on 120 HP Pokemon, it ain't good enough. Now, Espeon EX is one we talked about recently, so I'm going to be quick. For 1 colorless energy, you can devolve each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon, put the highest stage evolution into your opponent's hand. Now, this will screw over anyone using Rare Candy, because they'll then go back to the basic and have to find a new Rare Candy, but no one's using that anymore. The best way to use this is if you're playing Archeops in Expanded. 1 Espeon for 1 energy of any type. You can get an Archeops out and then use Espeon. Let's say you're playing against Vespiquen Flareon. You can use Espeon to put all of the Vespiquens and Flareons into your opponent's hand, and unless they've got a Hex Maniac that turn to turn off Archeops, there's nothing they can do. Outside of that, Espeon ain't seeing much play. Now we're going to leave Darkrai. I want to see him at the end. I want to finish on a high. Sizor EX, 20 damage, Steel Wing, reduce it by 20 the following turn, and let's not forget you've got stuff like Hard Charm and Special Metal, or whatever it's called, Steel Energy or Shield Energy, that's what it's called, that reduces damage done by 10. So you can use this to tank a little bit. For 2 Metal Energy, 50 damage. If it became active this turn, 110. It's not very much. It's weak to fire, which means an expanded Flareon in standard Entei. Not good, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a little bit too weak. There's a little bit of tanking that can be done. But honestly, if you're going to be running a metal deck, you might as well run stuff like Edgeslash and Dialga or something like that. Or, you know, even Tyrantrum, although you need a double Dragon / fighting energy for that. I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest with you. Now, there is a Mega Sizor, and this I like a little bit more. 120 for a double color, for 2 Steel Energy. You may discard a special energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon or a stadium in play. Now, this is basically 2-hit KOing everything, including Megas, which is key. Sizor, by the way, 220 HP. But when it really comes down to it, 120 is not that great on a Mega. Now, let's not forget, as with all the things, it's in a set, so you've got the Spirit Link. And you get to discard a Stadium, which will be annoying for your opponent, or a Special Energy, which will be annoying. Overall, I'm not saying no one's ever going to use it, or not make use of it, or not make a half-decent deck with it, but I'm saying it ain't great. Togekiss EX, I really, really don't like. It's Fairy, it's got 170 HP. For 1 Fairy Energy, you may add 20 damage. You can put an energy from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. Here's the saving grace. It says energy, not basic energy. Now again, Japanese translation could be wrong, as Palkia was initially. But that's kind of useful. You're still leaving an EX in the active and only doing 20 damage, but it's only for 1 energy. Decent as energy acceleration, but not stunning. If it was for a colorless energy, I could see it being kind of fun. It's Fairy Energy, so really, you don't want to be doing this. What you want to be doing is getting a Xerneas in the active and using Geomancy to put 2 energy on the bench from your deck, i.e. you don't have to have it in hand. Now, I know it's basic, not basic or special, but I'd rather have a Xerneas. Fairy and free colorless, flip 4 coins, 50 times the number of heads. On average, you'll be doing 100 damage. Yeah, there'll be turns where you hit 4 out of 4 heads, although that's a 1 in 16 chance, which is not high, which I think is a 6.25 chance, sorry. Yeah, it's not good. Not good. I don't like it. And the last underwhelming EX, although let's not be, Mega Gyarados looks really good. Emboar looks interesting. So we've got some good EXs. Ho-Oh EX. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon has any fire energy attached to it, basic, you may heal 50 damage. It's not bad. 130 damage, plus 30 to one of your opponents benched. For a grass and a water and a lightning. And this is a colorless Pokemon. So, no Dimension Valley. Although there's no colorless in it anyway, to be honest. No double dragon energy, no double colorless energy. No. 1 grass, 1 water, 1 lightning. And then you get to do 130 and 30 to the bench. Now, don't get me wrong, that's Night Spear plus 40 damage. And if there's a fire, you get to heal 50 damage from it every turn. But in order to do that, you've got to have a grass and a water and a lightning and a fire, a basic fire. It's just impractical. Sorry, it just is. Now let's end with possibly the best, and by possibly I mean definitely the best EX in the set. Because it is. It's not even close. Mega Gyarados, like I say, I could see Espeon being a fun little tech in an Archeops deck. And I could see Palkia being a tech in Blastoise against Night March. I could see Mega Gyarados being played in Blastoise just as a big beefy attacker and to completely swing the Eviltown matchup. And I could see Emboar replacing Charizard kind of in Entei. Although that's really not, it's only because you discard energy rather than not being able to attack. But Darkrai EX, and we've just broken an hour, so I'll try and be quick. This one I like. More in Expanded than Standard, but still not terrible in Standard. For 1 double colourless energy, 20 damage for each dark energy attached to all of your Pokemon. And let's not forget, you can use Baby Eviltown to start attaching Pokemon from energy from your discard pile to your bench. And now that that has been reprinted in the Pokekyun collection, he's hanging around for a while, we assume, unless it gets, rotated out at the end of the year, which I would be shocked if it happened. It would have to be a special exception. So you lead with Baby Eviltown, attaching energy to, I don't know, Malamar, Baby Eviltown, Eviltown EX. Nobody cares. 20 plus 20 damage for each dark energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So here's the thing. You can spread your dark energy around your bench. Let's say you get 6 dark energy on the bench. You're then doing 160 damage with a Muscle Band, 180. And what's your opponent going to do? Even if they knock out your Darkrai, you're still keeping all your dark energy on the bench. So all you need is 1 Darkrai and 1 double colourless, and you can just hit for the same damage you were hitting the previous turn. And if your opponent starts going after your energy on the bench, they're not KOing your attacker, which means you can keep attacking every turn. That's ludicrous, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely ludicrous. Now, you might think that's a good attack. Might I remind you of that Max Elixir thing, which does 60 damage. Look at the top 6 cards of your deck and attach a basic energy find there to one of your Pokemon. Yeah. That's going to see a bit of play. It's called Max Elixir. It's going to see play. It's really quite good. Now, again, one of the things that Andrew Wambolt, the Charizard Lounge dude, picked up on the Skype chat we had was that he'd run the numbers for some similar thing with 4 cards, and actually I think they'd run it with Great Ball, trying to run, look at the top so many cards of your deck, pick a Pokemon you find there. They'd run the stats trying to find the Pokemon you wanted, and apparently the odds were pretty good. Now, this isn't a testing issue, as he correctly pointed out. This is a mathematical issue. If you put enough energy in your deck, this will work. That's pretty good. So now you can start building energy on your bench nice and quickly and attacking with Darkrai. And your opponent can either take out your attacker or your energy, not both. And in Expanded, you've got Dark Patch. And with the combination of Eviltown EX, Eviltown the baby one, attaching energy to your bench from the discard, and Dark Patch, and Max Elixir, it really is not out of the question to put 10 or 12 basic energy in your deck and get 6 or 7 of them out in 1 or 2 turns. That is not outside the realms of possibility. And let's not forget that if instead of using a double colourless, you use 2 dark to get Darkrai's attack going, well, now they count towards the total as well. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but, we've got Darkrai, but, well, that first attack's good, but let's face it, you've got to get all that energy on the bench, and, it's not guaranteed, and it could be a little clunky, and maybe you don't get set up. At least he doesn't have a second attack that's really good. Oh, but he does, ladies and gentlemen. He does. His second attack, if your opponent's active Pokemon is asleep, 80 damage for free energy. If your opponent's active Pokemon is asleep, it does 80 more damage for a dark and a double colorless, i.e. 160 damage for a dark and a double colorless if your opponent's active Pokemon is asleep. Now, also coming in the set, and again, I'm going to look at him in a couple weeks' time, there's a Stage 1 Hypno. Once during your turn, you may leave both active Pokemon asleep. Yeah, that's right. And then expanded, you've got Hypnotoxic Laser. So, quite frankly, you got a situation here where the first attack is awesome, and if you can put your opponent asleep, and Hypno is a good way to do it, yeah, you got to put yourself asleep, but maybe you use a Zoroark to, go into the active and retreat with a Float Stone, for instance. There are ways around it. This is just good. Now, I believe I've made my thoughts fairly clear on Greninja in terms of actually being, a card which coming out in a new set is looking really good. And I think he is looking really good. And I am going to buy me some Greninja cards and play me some Greninja decks. But honestly, when you combine Max Elixir, Baby and Darkrai, and in Standard you've got maybe Yveltal EX, because Y Cyclone's still a good attack, and Baby Yveltal, and Malamar EX, you attach a Dark to Malamar, you put your opponent asleep. Oh look, I found a better option than Hypno. Sorry, was that slow rolling a bit mean? I forgive myself. You are attaching a Dark Energy when you attach to Malamar. That puts 20 more on Darkrai's attack, and your opponent goes instantly to sleep. That's right. Now you can do that attack for 160, or with a Muscle Band 180. So you've got Baby Yveltal, you've got Max Elixir, you've got this new Darkrai, you've got Malamar EX. That's crazy good. Oh yeah, and if you venture into Expanded, Dark Patch comes back out. This is silly. The only other Darkrai EX we had, the one that came out in Dark Explorers, was crazy good. Yeah, we've got a new one, ladies and gentlemen, and this one, I don't want to say it, I kind of do. It could be better. It's arguably better. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, you can argue anything, so that sentence is completely pointless. And while I'm being pedantic about semantics, I think that is a sign that it's time to end this lovely podcast. I've quite enjoyed today's podcast. It's been fun. Hopefully you've enjoyed it too. Hopefully you're still listening. We have talked about a little bit of news. We have talked about the fact that there are going to be Pokkén Tournament tournaments. And that is going to be good news, I imagine. We have talked about we've talked about the new cards from the Pokekyun collection. I've pronounced it terribly many, many times. And then we've looked at the EXs from Breakpoint. Next week, we're going to come back and we're going to look at the Break Pokemon and trainers from Breakpoint. And that means we get to talk about Greninja. And it's going to be awesome. Make sure you follow me on Twitter @TheWassy. If you've got any questions, comments, queries, or quibbles. If you're on YouTube, SoundCloud, or WordPress, just leave your comment in the appropriate place. Otherwise, you can email me @TheWassy. You can tweet me @TheWassy. Or email me at PTCGRadio @hotmail.co.uk. Make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, whether you listen there or not. Make sure that you are check it out by YouTube and you're subscribed on there. And look after yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. I will be back next week with another lovely podcast. And hopefully my top 10 cards of Breakthrough will be online sooner rather than later. I'm aiming for tomorrow. Fingers crossed. Look after yourselves till next week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.